As the Attorney General stated, this incident happened on January 5th, 2021. Not in the early morning hours, but it was certainly before noon. Sergeant McDonald was training Officer Crozier on traffic stops and in duties of being a traffic officer for the East Cleveland Police Department. They were conducting routine traffic duties, and then they came across a car driven by Vincent Belmonte. That vehicle had a loud muffler. They attempted to pull that vehicle over. Sergeant McDonald was driving. Officer Crozier was in the passenger seat. The car pulled over, car driven by Vincent Belmonte, pulled over, and it stopped for a brief period of time. Sergeant McDonald said, "Hold on, we're not going to get out yet because they may flee." That's exactly what happened. The car driven by Vincent Belmonte took off. Sergeant McDonald and Officer Crozier pursued that vehicle, driving through the city of East Cleveland. The vehicle driven by Vincent Belmonte was going at a high rate of speed. I think the speed that was quoted was between 50 and 60 miles per hour. The car was driving in a dangerous manner, at one point hitting a fire hydrant. At some point in time during this pursuit, the vehicle driven by Vincent Belmonte blew out 3 of the 4 tires and began to slow down quite dramatically. The officers were pursuing that vehicle, were essentially boxed it in. The vehicle driven by Vincent Belmonte came to a complete stop. He jumped out of the vehicle, Vincent Belmonte did, and fled. A little bit about that vehicle. That vehicle, as I stated, was driven by Vincent Belmonte, and the front passenger seat was a female, and in the rear of that vehicle was a male. Those 2 individuals also exited the vehicle and fled. Officers gave chase. Officer Crozier and Sergeant McDonald gave chase to Vincent Belmonte as he hopped over the hood of their police cruiser and fled. He actually ran out of his own shoes, Mr. Belmonte did, as he was running from the police officers. As the Attorney General stated, Vincent Belmonte had a weapon on him. And as Sergeant McDonald was giving chase, he aired that, he saw a weapon. And that weapon was a F&N 9mm with I believe the magazine held 22 rounds. So Sergeant McDonald was chasing Vincent Belmonte through a residential area. Officer Crozier decided to head them off, go in a different direction, see if they could trap Vincent Belmonte and take him into custody for his actions. As Sergeant McDonald was chasing Vincent Belmonte, they arrived at a fence in the backyard of someone's home. Mr. Belmonte was able to get over that fence. He got caught up briefly, but he was able to get over that fence. Sergeant McDonald never made it over that fence. He goes to the fence. He sees Vincent Belmonte. And as Mr. Belmonte is reaching into his hoodie, he's attempting to pull out his handgun. And it's at that time Sergeant McDonald discharged 3 rounds from his police-issued firearm. Those 3 rounds caused 4 injuries. We're not able to determine which shot came first or which one impacted Mr. Belmonte first. However, one of the shots went through Mr. Belmonte's right arm into his right chest area. So that wound was front to back. Mr. Belmonte was also struck in the back of the head, as well as in the lower right back area. He fell down almost immediately and died from those wounds. The pathologist who performed the autopsy on Mr. Belmonte said that both the head wound and the wound to the upper chest was likely fatal. Either one of those could have been fatal. The one in the chest caused a severe and extreme amount of blood loss. And the one in the back of the head that struck Mr. Belmonte also could have caused life-ending injury. After Mr. Belmonte was shot and he fell to the ground, Officer Crozier was able to finally get over the fence. Again, Officer Crozier was not in the immediate vicinity of Sergeant McDonald and Mr. Belmonte. He was a little bit a ways. But he was able to get over the fence, come to Sergeant McDonald, and essentially take Sergeant McDonald away from the scene. He took Sergeant McDonald away from the scene because at that time, other officers who were responding to the radio calls by Sergeant McDonald had headed off Vincent Belmonte's pursuit and were actually in the Apex Academy rear parking lot, and had come down. So they were on the other side of the fence with Mr. Belmonte. Sergeant McDonald and Officer Crozier never got over that fence. Sergeant McDonald was led away, and essentially the investigation started from there. Almost immediately, East Cleveland police officers called for assistance, medics. The medics arrived a short time later, attempted some life-saving techniques, and took Mr. Belmonte to the hospital in an attempt to save his life. As the Attorney General stated, they were not successful, and Mr. Belmonte ultimately died. The vehicle that was driven by Mr. Belmonte was reported stolen in October. Again, this incident happened where he was killed, happened in July 5th, 2021. I'm sorry, January 5th, 2021 was when Mr. Belmonte was killed. The vehicle was reported stolen in October of the prior year. The weapon that Mr. Belmonte had was reported stolen the following day. So on January 6th, the weapon was reported stolen, and it was reported stolen by the individual who was in the back seat of the car that was being pursued by the police officers. So the backseat passenger of Mr. Belmonte's vehicle reported the firearm stolen the following day. Police officers, as the Attorney General stated, are required to protect the community. And Ohio law, Supreme Court has held that law enforcement officers are allowed to use deadly force to protect the life and safety of individuals, citizens, as well as fellow police officers, as well as themselves. And an individual fleeing who has demonstrated an unwillingness to comply with police officers, a reasonable officer may feel that their flight with a weapon poses a great danger to the community and society. Additionally, however, Sergeant McDonald's statement was that he shot Mr. Belmonte, and Mr. Belmonte spun and fell to the ground. That would be consistent with the injuries that were reported from the pathologist, the coroner, that he was shot in the upper chest area, spun, and then could have been shot in the back from the remaining rounds that were fired by Sergeant McDonald. The body cameras worn. East Cleveland Police Department did not have cruiser cams at that time. They did not have cruiser cameras to pick up anything. However, officers did have body cameras. Officer Crozier turned on his body camera during the traffic pursuit. So when Vincent Belmonte's vehicle, or the vehicle he was driving, sped away, and Sergeant Larry McDonald and Officer Crozier began pursuing that vehicle, it was at that time that Officer Crozier turned on his body camera. So it picked up a large amount of this incident. However, it did not pick up the shooting because, as I stated, Officer Crozier attempted to head off Vincent Belmonte and was not in the exact same vicinity when Sergeant Larry McDonald shot and killed Vincent Belmonte. Officer Crozier was in a different area. However, we can hear audio from Sergeant Larry McDonald, who is yelling at Vincent Belmonte, please don't stop, please don't stop. I'm sorry, please stop, please stop. He was either saying police stop or please stop. It is unclear from the audio that we were able to extract, but he's saying either please stop or please stop. Please don't do it. Please don't do it. And before the shots were fired. So we do hear that audio loud and clear from Officer Crozier's body cam. Sergeant Larry McDonald's camera comes on for 2 seconds during the pursuit. That's the 2 seconds as Vincent Belmonte is getting over the fence. It's a 2-second video from Sergeant Larry McDonald's body cam. And Sergeant Larry McDonald told police investigators or BCI investigators that he actually thought his video camera was off and was turning it on. He didn't know that he had previously turned it on. We had a very close look at the body cameras that were used by East Cleveland Police Department at that time. And it is a GoPro camera. It's a little cube. It's a civilian type of camera with one button on it. You press the button, it beeps 3 times to let you know it's on, and you press the button again and there is no sound and it goes off. There's no flashing lights that remain on. There's no vibration or anything like that. And again, it is just one button, not an on button and then somewhere else on the device an off button. So that is the information of the investigation. Thank you.